Imagine the depths of human suffering and degradation that can evoke an overwhelming sense of despair. Envision the most dilapidated alleyways, the most decayed and disease-ridden facades, and the most putrid streams. Picture indescribable filth, and within this setting, individuals disguised as specters, their tattered rags barely concealing their identities. If you were to conjure this image, you would find yourself transported to the Spitalfields district of London in 1888, just north of Whitechapel. Spitalfields, though not extensive, encompassed a mere 400 square meters. Yet, as early as 1861, it was home to 800 thieves, prostitutes, and vagabonds. Trust me, it was no coincidence that Dickens led Fagin to Spitalfields in his writings. In 1902, when Jack London visited Spitalfields, he was appalled by what he saw. He encountered a dozen elderly, wretched, and toothless women who were revealed to be prostitutes still seeking clients. It was said that they would work for a meager 2p, or even a stale crust of bread. That's the grim reality of Spitalfields in 1888. It was precisely on August 31, 1888, that a porter named George Cross found himself traversing Whitechapel en route to Spitalfields. It was not a particularly cheerful day, as George anticipated spending the entire morning hauling crates and boxes. People did not willingly venture into this neighborhood, especially under such circumstances. As he walked down a street that housed a horse slaughterhouse, a repugnant smell assailed his senses. Throughout this tale, one must consider the foul stench emanating from these streets. The odor of deceased horses wafted towards him. At 3:20 in the morning, he found himself alone, when suddenly, in the middle of the street, he spotted a tarpaulin. He paused, thinking,
My God, a tarpaulin! That's valuable. It must have fallen off a cart. I can sell it.
Even when they worked, these individuals were extremely impoverished. He approached the object, only to realize that it wasn't a tarpaulin, it was a woman. A lifeless woman lay there on the pavement, drenched in her own blood. He hurried to find the nearest policeman, eager to report the gruesome discovery. Soon enough, a doctor arrived at 4 o'clock in the morning to examine the corpse. He observed that the woman had been murdered, her throat brutally slit by a knife that severed both carotid arteries. This doctor, lacking in curiosity or perhaps keen to return to his slumber, did not delve further into the investigation. It was only later in the day, when the body was taken to the morgue, that another doctor, lifting the woman's skirt, made a horrifying discovery. She had been disemboweled. This marked the first instance of a series of crimes that would dominate headlines for months, even years to come. The victim was identified as Polly Nichols, a 42-year-old woman. Polly Nichols became known as the first victim of the notorious figure known as Jack the Ripper. From August to November 1888, Jack the Ripper struck 5 times, possibly 6, targeting exclusively female victims. He would begin by slashing their throats before proceeding. It is worth noting that all of these women were prostitutes. There exists a double enigma surrounding Jack the Ripper. Firstly, the mystery of his identity. At the time, no one could identify the infamous killer, leaving him shrouded in anonymity. However, the second mystery is perhaps the one that captivates me the most, the enduring notoriety and celebrity he has attained. Consider this. There have been murderers in Great Britain and other countries who have claimed more lives than Jack the Ripper. Many of them were briefly celebrated, only to fade into obscurity. So how is it that after over a century, Jack the Ripper continues to command such attention? Even today, children in London are frightened by mere mention of his name. In the Spitalfields district of London, hardly a day goes by without some reference to the sidewalk or courtyard where one of his victims met her tragic fate. Novels and films have been dedicated to his chilling saga, with new adaptations emerging every decade or so. Explaining this phenomenon is no easy task. Nevertheless, I believe it can be partly attributed to the manner in which Jack the Ripper carried out his crimes, the theatricality that accompanied his killings. Additionally, it is the way he announced his gruesome acts through letters, creating an aura of intrigue around his own deeds. This is why Jack the Ripper stands as a distinct criminal case, an enigmatic figure emerging from the shadows and vanishing into the night, encompassing not only the darkness of Spital Fields and Whitechapel, but also the annals of history. In films, the victims of Jack the Ripper are often portrayed as barmaids or performers from music halls. Why? Well, because they possess an attractiveness that is pleasing to the eye. However, this depiction does not align with the reality of Jack the Ripper's victims. These women are generally not young or glamorous courtesans. Rather, they are prostitutes who are much closer to destitution. Take poor Polly Nichols, for example. She had a relatively normal life once, you know. Yes, normal. She was married and even had 5 children. But one day, she abandoned everything. Her husband, her children. The reason? Alcohol. It is a recurring theme in this case. These women, these prostitutes, turn to drink. They drown their sorrows in alcohol. Can we really blame them? It becomes their only solace. And so, alcohol swiftly led Polly Nichols down a treacherous path, eventually finding herself on the streets. She hit rock bottom, descending into the depths of despair. Walking the streets of London is one thing, but when you walk the streets of Spitalfields, you know you've reached the nadir. These women sell themselves for next to nothing. Polly Nichols had no home, so where did she go? Well, when she had 4 pence. Yes, it wasn't much, just 4 pence. But when she had those 4 pence, she would seek refuge in the asylum, the poorhouse. Can you fathom that within this confined perimeter, in these 2 neighborhoods, there were 200 asylums or poorhouses? It's a harrowing reality, but that's how it was. So, on the evening of August 30th, Polly Nichols didn't possess those 4 pence. She had been cast out of the asylum. Her friend, another prostitute, encountered her on the street. There she was, walking, her gait unsteady as she had been drinking. Concerned, her friend asked,
"Why aren't you at the asylum? It's late."
Polly replied,
"Well, I wanted to earn the money for the bed, those 4 pence.
"Did you manage to earn it?" "Well, I did earn it 3 times. "And then?"
Well, I drank it as I went along.
"And then?"
Well, now I'm going to find another client to earn the 4 pence.
Did she find this client? It's likely, but not under the circumstances she had envisioned, because the client she encountered was indeed Jack the Ripper. So the next day, the press talked about the murder of Polly Nichols. But you know, if you read the newspapers from that date, you won't find much. Just a few lines because, first of all, there were many murders in London at that time. Not a week would go by without 4 or 5 bodies being found in the Thames. It's unclear where they came from, and there wasn't much investigation. So, the death, the murder of a prostitute in those neighborhoods, it's mentioned in a few lines, nothing more. But it will be talked about a week later, on September 7th. And why? Well, because on that day, another body was found. It was discovered in a courtyard in the same neighborhood, just a few meters from where Polly Nichols was killed. And there was a decent man who approached and saw the body there in the morning. The same thing happened, but this time the killer, the murderer, struck with savage violence. The head was practically severed from the body. And it was seen. It was photographed during the autopsy. So yes, a second woman, and this woman's name is Annie Chapman. Her life is also recounted. This woman, too, was married. She was married, then she left her husband. Her husband had a good job. He even provided her with a pension until 1886, and then he died. So there was no more money, and it was the same downward spiral, the streets of Spitalfields and Whitechapel. These women have no home, so they don't bathe. They are dirty. They carry the stench of alcohol, a repulsive smell, a withered, aged face. So what do you say then? But are there clients for these women? Yes, there are. So why do clients choose them? Maybe by appearance? It's possible. Perhaps also because these women offer the lowest rates in London, and perhaps in the world. So Annie Chapman, she too was driven out of an asylum. She too sought to earn money. Annie Chapman is tired. She is sick. The autopsy will prove that she has tuberculosis in the final stage. A friend in the night, Mrs. Coptis Cox, tells her,
"But you should go to the asylum. You're not well."
Well, no, I'm not well, and I was just given a few coins, so I'm going to have a cup of tea. Yes, I haven't eaten today. I haven't even had a cup of tea.
They're hungry too. So she left and encountered Jack the Ripper. And the outcome? A severed blow. And the same thing, a massive knife blow to the belly, and this time, Jack the Ripper. Well, we don't know yet that he is called Jack the Ripper, but we will call him Jack the Ripper. We know. Removed, I'm sorry to say it, the entire genital apparatus. So the second victim. And suddenly, in these neighborhoods, anger explodes. How can the same area, the same thing, have another woman with her throat cut, disemboweled? It's the same killer. It's his signature. But will he strike again? When? Tomorrow. The day after tomorrow. Next week. We're in danger in the neighborhood, and panic and terror rise in Whitechapel and Spitalfields. And the police arrive. And the police search. And they question everyone. In the dives, they question 116 suspects. Anything and anyone is considered suspicious. They don't find him. Traditionally in these neighborhoods, needless to say, the police are not well liked. But this time, not only are they not liked, but they are despised. It is remembered and it is recalled that the chief of this police is Sir Charles Warren. Certainly, Charles Warren is a general of the colonial army. And yes, in this era of colonial expeditions, he has brutally suppressed some uprisings. And it is precisely because he has severely suppressed these uprisings that he was appointed in London. Because it is believed that things are not going well in London. And yes, remember that we are in a very serious period of unemployment, of dreadful misery. It was the terrible winter of 1887. And for the first time, the destitute, the unemployed, came out of their neighborhoods, their ghetto. Now these destitute were not very meek. You know what they did on Sundays. They organized themselves in a parade and marched behind banners. And on these banners, do you know what was written? Simply verses from the gospel, saying that the rich should think of the poor. And then they would go around the churches, in the nice neighborhoods, unfortunately. And there, the upper class had the spectacle of dreadful misery that they preferred not to think about. So they found it scandalous. So Sir Charles Warren, the general of the colonial army, they said, "Here is the man for the job." He was the man for the job because Sir Charles Warren faced these destitute, and there was the infamous Bloody Sunday. During Bloody Sunday, there were 200 seriously injured, very seriously. You have to read the Times. The Times the next day was literally jubilant, saying, "Bravo, let's do it again." And what a pity there weren't more victims. It would have taught them a good lesson. That's the tone of the time. So, as a result, Sir Charles Warren was ennobled. Well, yes, they have to be rewarded, but he became the most hated man by the London population. And consequently, the entire police force, yes, the whole police force, It is important to know this because this police force is traumatized, and at the very moment when Jack the Ripper chooses to strike, he is dealing with a police force that is uneasy. And that can also explain a number of things. So 2 people dead. The fear is escalating. Suddenly the streets are empty in the evenings. The bars are no longer bustling, and the owners are facing bankruptcy. The prostitutes have no clients anymore. Fear, panic, and horror grip the area. Then, after a while, a press agency, the Central News Agency, receives a letter addressed to the boss, as the title says. This letter, you must know, reveals the exact psyche of the killer, and especially his extraordinary spirit of audacity, swagger, and a demonic sense of dark humor that hides within him. He writes to the boss,
Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue, and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope, ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work. Then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha.
At the very bottom of the letter, one could read the signature, Jack the Ripper, and we knew it immediately. This name, this infamous pseudonym, was given by Jack the Ripper himself. The police enlarged the letter. They reproduced it on gigantic posters, displayed on all the walls of London. Dozens of people gathered around these posters. Jack the Ripper. As we discussed earlier, why the notoriety of Jack the Ripper lasted so long? Well, I believe that part of it lies in the pseudonym he deliberately chose for himself. It may be a stroke of genius. Jack the Ripper is astonishing, and even to this day, it continues to astound us. Regarding the letter, people who recognized the handwriting were urged to come forward and denounce the author. However, no one came forward. Fear persisted, and in response to the police's failure, a vigilance committee was formed in Whitechapel and Spitalfields. Men decided to patrol the streets every night armed with sticks and weapons, hoping to apprehend the Ripper and protect the neighborhood's residents. Even students from Oxford joined in the patrols. Then, at the end of September, on September 29th, a new letter was sent, this time addressing the police. He wrote numerous letters, and a psychological study was conducted on them. This letter was incredibly peculiar. On September 29th, the letter warned, "Be careful, I'm going to strike again. I will operate in Minorices, a location in the neighborhood, either on the 1st or 2nd at midnight. So now we know." Astonishingly, Jacques the Ripper had the audacity to indicate the exact place and time of his next attack, even though it was likely a deception. He claimed not to fear the police, as they were never present when he carried out his killings. After sending this letter a few hours later, Jacques the Ripper struck again. He committed another murder under incredible circumstances. There was a club for foreign workers, and within the courtyard, Jack the Ripper encountered a woman, presumably luring her there by posing as a client. This woman's name was Elizabeth Stride, and her lifeless body was discovered the next day. Her throat had been severed, but unlike his other victims, she was not disemboweled. Why? Because in this bustling courtyard, where people constantly came and went, it was astonishing that he killed under such conditions. He was likely interrupted and only had time to kill. However, a man like Jack the Ripper, unless he goes all the way, unless he opens up the victim's entrails, he is not satisfied. He wants to be fulfilled. That's why, 3/4 of an hour later, he struck again nearby, this time in an alley. It was unbelievable, a square with 3 streets, constantly patrolled by policemen. Yet he managed to kill there. It seemed inconceivable that through those streets, numerous people could pass at any moment. But he carried out his gruesome act. This time, he disemboweled his victim. Now he was content, having accomplished what he set out to do. He even took one of the victim's kidneys and took it away. A few days later, Mr. Losk, the president of the Vigilance Committee, received a letter from the Ripper. Inside the letter, which arrived as a small package, was a piece of the kidney. It belonged to a woman named Kate, the Ripper's previous victim. The police showed the doctors, who confirmed that it was indeed the kidney of the Ripper's latest victim. The letter contained a chilling passage.
From hell. Mr. Lusksaw, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you. T'other purse I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody niff that took it out if you only water well longer. Signed, Catch Me When You Can, Mr. Lusk.
Clearly, we are dealing with a man afflicted with homicidal madness. These are the most dangerous individuals because intelligence does not vanish in the midst of such madness. This was the pinnacle of terror, as fear and terror had never reigned so dominantly. The police, constantly powerless, continued their investigations, searches, and interrogations in dens, asylums, and every possible lead. The Vigilance Committee and Oxford students joined the pursuit. Yet, nothing, absolutely nothing, yielded results. Weeks passed, then a month. We began to breathe a sigh of relief. Perhaps the man had given up. Maybe he had disappeared. What happened to him? Was the nightmare finally over?